All right, let's jump right in. The source material we're looking at today gets into a really deep tension, one that's baked right into America's founding ideas. And what's wild is, it argues this huge conflict is hidden in a phrase we all use, probably without even thinking about it: the cost of living.
And it all starts with these words. I mean, you know them, right? This is the bedrock promise from the Declaration of Independence. These rights are supposed to be so fundamental, so unalienable, that they're a part of who we are.
But here's where it gets interesting. The source takes this promise, this sacred idea, and it just asks a question. It's a really simple question on the surface, but it's so powerful that it's basically the key to their entire argument.
And here's the question. If life is an unalienable right, why does it have a cost? Boom. Just let that sink in for a second. If the right to live can't be sold or taken away, why do we have to pay for the privilege of living? This one question, it frames everything else we're about to talk about.
Okay, so let's get into this constitutional contradiction. The source's argument is that this phrase we use all the time, cost of living, isn't just some economic term. Nope, they claim it's actual proof that our system is breaking its own most important rule.
And I love this analogy they use. The source says that for most people today, survival is basically a subscription service. Think about it. You have to pay your monthly bill for food, for water, for a roof over your head, and if you stop paying, what happens? Your service, your right to life, gets revoked. It turns this fundamental human right into just another transaction, like paying for Netflix. So, you might be asking, okay, if the system's broken, what's the fix? Well, the source doesn't just point out problems. It actually proposes an alternative, a framework it calls egalitarianism. And it's really careful to position this as something different, a third way, that isn't just the same old political debate.
This table does a great job of laying it all out. On one end, you've got what the source calls socialism, where the government owns pretty much everything. On the other end, unregulated capitalism, where everything is for sale, including the basics you need to survive. And right there in the middle, you have their idea, egalitarianism. The government's job is just to make sure everyone has access to the necessities. That's it. Once that foundation is there, the free market can go wild on top of it.
They use this great analogy of building a house. Think of society like that. Egalitarianism is all about building a solid, unbreakable foundation. That foundation is the basics: food, water, shelter, healthcare. Once that's secure for everyone, then the free market can build whatever it wants on top of it. You can build a skyscraper, you can build a tiny little shop, but the key is nobody can fall through the floor into ruin.
Okay, now, buckle up because this is where the argument gets really wild. This is the part that takes our everyday ideas of capitalism and socialism and just flips them on their head. It's a total reframing.
So the logic goes like this. In a country like the US, the government isn't supposed to be some separate, scary entity. It's supposed to be us. It's owned by we the people. So the source argues if the people own something through their government, that's not tyranny, that's democracy in action.
So in this view, public ownership is just democratic control, right? If you don't like how the public water company is being run, you can vote to change the people in charge. It's accountable to the public.
Now, contrast that with what the source calls private ownership of those same necessities. You can't vote out the CEO of a pharmaceutical company if they triple the price of your insulin. There's no democratic process there. The power is held by a tiny group of people, a corporate board, who are completely unaccountable to you or me.
And this leads to the most provocative quote of all. The source basically says modern capitalism is just socialism in disguise. But instead of the state controlling everything, it's a few powerful corporations. It's still centralized power in unaccountable hands. The only difference is the dictator is a CEO, not a government official. I mean, think about it from their perspective. Inside a big company, is there a democracy? No way. Decisions come from the top down. It's a command economy. A central planning committee, the execs, decide how to allocate all the resources. The source is pointing out the irony that this is the exact same structure that capitalism supposedly hates about state socialism.
All right, so that's a lot of theory, but what does this foundation for survival actually look like in the real world? The source gets pretty specific about what it would take to build it.
So here are the main pillars. For food, a public grocery system that provides basic staples at cost or even free. For utilities, public power and water that can't just be shut off.
For healthcare, a public system for all the essential stuff. For housing, public options to make sure everyone has a dignified place to live. And finally, education, free all the way from early childhood through job training. Now, the idea isn't to get rid of private grocery stores or private schools, but to create a public safety net that no one can fall through.
And this is a really critical point in their argument. This whole plan isn't meant to destroy the free market. The source says it's meant to unleash it. If you take away the constant fear of not being able to eat or have a home, people are actually freer to start a business, to innovate, to take risks. It creates a more dynamic economy for everyone.
To really drive home what happens when that foundation isn't there, the source uses this really powerful and personal analogy to explain how the current system can extract value from the most vulnerable.
It uses the real-life experience of someone who is a foster child to frame this economic model. It's a thought experiment, really, that follows the money the government provides for that child's care and asks, where does it actually go?
And the whole thing boils down to this one question. Who is the investment here? Is the money spent by the state truly an investment in the child?
And the answer is just devastatingly simple. If I was the investment, it would have been a trust fund. The point is, if the money was really for the child's benefit, it would have been put aside for their future. But since it was paid out to a bunch of different people and services, the child wasn't the investment at all. They were just the reason for the transaction. The value was extracted from them, not invested in them.
And that powerful idea brings us right back to where we started. It all comes full circle, back to that fundamental conflict that the source pointed out at the very beginning.
So after looking at everything, from the Declaration of Independence to these different economic models, all the way to that foster child analogy, the source argues that it all leads back to one single unavoidable question.
And here it is. We're ending right where we began, with the question that started this whole thing. If life is an unalienable right in America, why is there a cost of living at all? And that's the final thought the source material leaves us with. It's a challenge, really, to look at the country's founding promise and then look at our daily reality and ask if they match up.